If you've built a PC in the last few years, you already know the problem. Graphics cards stay expensive, RAM prices remain high, and only a few companies control most of the supply. So when Chinese memory chips from companies like CXMT or new Chinese graphics cards appear at lower prices, a lot of people react the same way. Finally, some relief, more competition, lower prices for the rest of us. The reaction makes sense. We wanted more options for a long time. But here's the distinction. This is not normal free market competition. These cheaper chips come from a system that follows very different rules, and those rules have consequences for American companies, for national security, and for Taiwan. In this video, we're going to break down exactly how the state-funded Playbook works, why the new wave of free Chinese AI models is part of that same trap, how this directly threatens Taiwan's silicon shield, and finally, I'll take on the top counter-arguments you probably hear. So let's get into it. First, let's be clear. Chinese chips are getting better. That's a fact. CXMT, China's leading DRAM maker, has expanded its memory production so fast that some estimates say it could nearly match Micron's output by the end of 2026. That would make China the second largest DRAM producer in the world. Other Chinese companies continue advancing storage chips and AI accelerators. Huawei's Ascend chips and several newer Chinese GPU designs are already shipping in significant numbers. This happened even while the United States restricted sales of the most advanced lithography machines and fabrication tools. Ignoring the progress doesn't help anyone. The real question is not whether the chips function, the question is how they reach that point and what that method means for everyone else. In a normal private market, companies like AMD, Nvidia, or Micron take huge risks. They invest billions in research, and if their products fail or the money runs out, the company can fail. State-backed Chinese chip makers don't operate under those constraints. Because state sovereign funds absorb their financial losses, these companies don't face the same pressure to remain profitable today. Their objective is market saturation. By flooding the market and undercutting Western and allied pricing, they bleed out private companies that actually have to run a real business to survive. It is a free market competition where one player has an endless state-funded checkbook designed to drive everyone else out of business. Add decades of documented industrial espionage, cyber theft, and forced technology transfers, the picture becomes clear. These state-backed firms didn't pay the multi-billion-dollar price tag of trial and error research and development. They skipped much of that cost, subsidized the final product, and dumped it onto the global market. We've already seen this pattern play out in multiple industries. Solar panels are the most famous example, but the same approach hits steel, aluminum, rare earths, shipbuilding, and more recently, electric vehicles and batteries. In each case, heavy government support created massive overcapacity. Prices collapsed, and companies outside China that had to operate under normal market rules struggled or shut down. Yes, consumers got lower prices, but the long-term consequence was less competition, weaker supply chains, and greater dependence on Chinese production. The exact same playbook is now showing up in artificial intelligence. In July 2026, Beijing-backed Moonshot AI released a massive AI model called Kimi K3. It matched top American models in coding and complex tasks, but with one big difference. They gave it away for free, allowing anyone to download the full code. Moonshot is heavily backed by Chinese state-linked funds, and the pattern here should look very similar. First, state capital absorbs the massive bills for power, chips, and training clusters. Second, they flood the market by handing the AI model out for free or dirt cheap to undercut private competition. And third, they create ecosystem lock-in, getting global developers hooked on state-subsidized tech while starving Western labs of the revenue needed to fund future R&D. When an authoritarian state subsidizes free AI, there is always a hidden cost. If enough global startups build their software on Chinese AI foundations, the CCP gets to set the technical standards for the next generation of software. Now, some developers will say, if I download the AI code and run it locally on my PC, then China can't see my data. Doesn't change the bigger economic trap. You're still helping a state-funded system flood the market. It undercuts private innovation and traps the tech world inside an ecosystem bound by China's national intelligence laws. Taiwan produces the majority of the world's most advanced chips. TSMC alone makes most of the leading-edge processors. That concentration creates a powerful deterrent. An attack or blockade that damages those factories would trigger an immediate global economic crisis. This reality is called Taiwan's silicon shield. China's state-driven semiconductor expansion is explicitly designed to break that shield by accomplishing two goals. Insulation. It reduces China's own economic vulnerability to Western sanctions in the event of a military conflict. And erosion. It reduces the world's dependence on Taiwanese factories, weakening the strategic deterrence that helps protect Taiwan. How do you think the people in Taiwan feel about this? Do companies like ASUS, Gigabyte, or MSI want a stronger China that reduces the world's reliance on Taiwanese technology? Do South Korea or Japan want a more powerful China dominate the supply chains they also depend on? These aren't abstract questions. They affect real companies and real countries that built their industries under different rules. Free market rules, democratic rules. It's important to remember that these chips and advanced AI systems are dual use. They run consumer devices and games, but they also power military systems, communication networks, and critical infrastructure. Greater control by a government that doesn't share democratic values and is actively modernizing its military raises risks that go far beyond the price of a ramp stick. And what is the ultimate risk? Conflict over Taiwan. The Chinese Communist Party has been explicit. They will never renounce the use of force to achieve reunification. A stronger Chinese semiconductor industry reduces Beijing's dependence on Taiwanese factories. That weakens one of the major barriers to military action and raises the risk of a serious flashpoint in that region. When I see this topic discussed online, there are some common rebuttals that are frequently brought up. So let's address the big ones head on. The United States also subsidizes its own chip industry through the CHIPS Act. People constantly point to the $280 billion US CHIPS Act and say, look, America is doing the exact same thing. But that comparison falls apart the second you look at the math and the methods. First, of that $280 billion, only $39 billion went to direct semiconductor manufacturing grants. China's state guidance funds have spent over $140 billion over the same period, backed by endless state bank loans and free land. Second, the CHIPS Act is a defensive, transparent law passed in broad daylight to fix a dangerous supply chain bottleneck. It has strict financial audits and forces companies to follow open market rules. China's approach is an offensive, opaque industrial campaign built on state-absorbed losses, forced tech transfers, and IP theft. One is a rule of law democracy trying to ensure it doesn't run out of microchips during a crisis. The other is non-market mercantilism, using the full financial power of the state to undercut private enterprise and take over strategic industries. Now, detractors will say, what about US sanctions, tariffs, and export controls? Isn't the US interfering by blocking companies like ASML from selling advanced chip-making machines to China? First, defensive regulations protect an open market. State-directed dumping destroys it. Second, when it comes to technology like ASML's EUV lithography machines, that equipment relies heavily on foundational research and patented technology developed right here in US national labs and American companies. ASML legally licenses that critical IP. If you build a machine using US-owned patents, you're legally subject to US export laws. Restricting the export of dual-use, highly sensitive technology isn't market manipulation, it's national security. Unless you're arguing that the United States is obligated to hand over its government patent R&D to help accelerate the military modernization of a foreign adversary, should we really give away technology that could be used against Americans or our allies in places like Taiwan? A Taiwan that relies on the Silicon Shield to deter an invasion? Keeping a tight lock on that IP is basic statecraft. This is just capitalism. Lower prices are good. American companies are simply losing to better competition. The second big pushback I hear is, look, capitalism 101. Low prices are good for consumers. If American companies can't compete on prices, then that's their problem. But state-subsidized price dumping is not capitalism. It's again, non-market mercantilism. In the capitalist market, companies take risks, spend their own money on R&D, turn a profit, and go bankrupt if they fail. But when a company is backed by an authoritarian state with an endless checkbook, they don't have to turn a profit. They can sell RAM, GPUs, or AI tokens far below the actual cost to produce them. This isn't better competition, it's predatory pricing. The state absorbs the financial losses specifically to bleed out private companies in the West, Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea who actually have to run a real business to survive. We already watched this exact movie play out with solar panels. Massive state cash flooded the market, cheap panels arrived, and almost every private manufacturer in the US and Europe went out of business. Once free market options are dead, cheap consumer prices disappear, choice vanishes, and you're left dependent on a state-controlled monopoly. Okay, you might be thinking, well, come on, Nvidia and Micron are multi-billion-dollar giants. They aren't going broke. Well, history shows us how fast dominance evaporates when state cash enters the room. In the early 1980s, American tech companies controlled virtually the entire global memory market. Then, a decade of state-subsidized dumping forced almost every single one of them out of memory. including Intel, who had to abandon memory entirely just to survive. Tech giants don't die overnight. They get starved of R&D budgets until they fall behind on innovation. Now, when you look at this history, people often say, well, didn't Japan and South Korea use state subsidies to build their industries? The difference between state-subsidized growth back then compared to what we're seeing today comes down to two things: intent and accountability. When Democratic allies used industrial subsidies, we were able to still negotiate trade agreements under international law to enforce fair market rules. But when an authoritarian state uses state dumping backed by military-civil fusion, where civilian tech is legally tied to military power, it's not a commercial disagreement among allies. It's a deliberate campaign to control global infrastructure, weaken our allies, and weaponize strategic industries. American companies and the US government already collect our data, so what's the real difference? The third objection usually deals with privacy. They say American tech giants and the US government harvest our data anyway, so what's the difference if China does it too? Look, I get the cynicism. Big data tracking is frustrating. But equating data practices in a constitutional republic to state-directed harvesting under an authoritarian government ignores how both legal systems actually work. In the United States, companies and government agencies operate under a system of laws, courts, and constitutional protections. The Fourth Amendment limits unreasonable searches. Privacy laws, civil lawsuits, congressional oversight, and a free press create real constraints, even when those constraints are imperfect and constantly tested. In a free society, we can challenge data practices in court, vote out officials who go too far, and punish bad actors with our wallets by switching to better options. In an authoritarian state, you get none of these choices. Chinese companies operate under a completely different legal reality. Under Article 7 of China's National Intelligence Law, domestic organizations and citizens are legally required to assist state intelligence work. There's no independent judiciary, no constitutional protection for individual privacy against the state, and no free press that can investigate government overreach without severe risk. On top of that, the Chinese Communist Party explicitly operates under a strategy of military-civil fusion. That means advanced civilian technology, including AI architecture, cloud data, semiconductor designs, is legally tied to state military modernization. When you combine zero privacy protections with state military mandates, your data isn't just sitting on a server. Under Chinese law, that access can be leveraged to feed defense AI, map critical infrastructure, and target foreign networks. Let's not sugarcoat the implications of this. If a real-world conflict breaks out, your data isn't being harvested to sell you ads. It's fed directly into defense AI systems built to map our infrastructure, target our defenses and vulnerabilities. Everyone wants lower prices and better performance. PC building has become outrageously expensive, and it feels like this hobby is becoming increasingly out of reach for the average builder. But chasing short-term price relief from state-subsidized dumping is a dangerous trade-off. Saving a few bucks on the hardware or jumping on a cheap state-backed AI model isn't a win if it starves the companies that actually innovate, and undermines the security of our democratic allies in the process. So how should we move forward? How should we look at this as consumers and builders? Support private companies in the United States, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, and other allied countries that take commercial risks and protect intellectual property. Don't reward intellectual property theft. Don't treat government-backed market distortion as ordinary competition. Some people might look at this as just business. But as a Marine, you're trained to look at supply chains and technology through a different lens. Not just as consumer goods, but as national security and strategic deterrence. Hey, if this analysis gave you a new lens on this issue, leave your thoughts below. I'm always open to healthy dialogue and honest pushback. If you appreciate independent tech commentary, like and subscribe. Join the squadron and maintain the heading. I'll see you in the next one.